Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Francois, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. It's been at least 3 years. I'm pretty sure it's been 3 years.
Probably. Thank you for having the courage to have me back.
Courage. I love talking with you, man. Or at least our last chat went so well. We talked about like time and space and yeah, the obviously we're probably this episode we're probably going to talk about the alien subject, but would you like to introduce yourself to everyone out there listening who might not know who you are?
Okay. So I'm a software engineer in a university in France. I did some study. My initial training was in physics and astrophysics. I worked 6 years in an observatory and in a planetarium. And after I went as a software engineer in computing.
Can you catch me up on the past 3 years? Because you just started mentioning some stuff about regrowing teeth where I'm like, okay, you've been down a different rabbit hole than I've been. I've been in a more historical route, learning more about American history in particular, and having a large distrust for the government. So when we land in the UAP subject, all my viewpoints would be like, I do not trust a word the government is saying. But I'm interested. Catch me up, man. Tell me all about life and all the interesting ideas you got out there. We can start with the growing back organs if you want. That sounds fascinating.
Okay, so what we just said before, we were talking about a researcher called Michael Levin, which is on X and is a specialist about trying to see how the kind of electric signature of the organs when an organism grows and how we can reproduce some different organs with the same kind of electrical stimulation. It more or less is kind of it's like if you found another informational system in the body, which is not in the DNA, but which is distributed through an electrical map of the organism. Uh, so, and we said because you had this problem with your teeth, we said that in the future we may be able to actually regrowth the teeth that you want if it's missing, and if we understand how to activate those biological subroutines which control the growth of each organ.
Now, would that be able to be implemented with like amputees, people that are missing like a limb, for instance? I feel like it would be easier to hook up, like if you lost a finger. Like I have a buddy, he got his finger in an accident, got it cut off, but they sewed it back on. But he can't move it like how I can move my finger like this. And it's been like that for 10 years now. He just can't move it. It doesn't have the flexibility or the motions, like the nerves are dead in there. Where I'm wondering, it's probably easier to reattach something and then find a way science wise to get the nerves to work again so you have a functioning limb. But regrowing a whole like finger or regrowing something of a different magnitude seems like a way more complicated route.
Yeah, it is, but biology is a field which is making a lot of progress. So
What's the biggest advancement do you think we've gone? Do you think it's more technology, biology, which out of all the academic fields you could possibly choose from?
I think biology had a huge improvement. The, the quantum mechanics, for example, gave us the transistors in 1947 because the transistors is application of quantum mechanics, which predicted that some specific materials called semiconductors would be able to conduct electricity under certain conditions and that we could make switch with it. And before 1947, we had only vacuum tubes in order to have computers. They were very huge and very energetic, and you could only have them in big universities. And so without understanding of quantum mechanics, we wouldn't have small transistors, and then we wouldn't be able to go to the moon. And therefore, we wouldn't be able to be aliens for possible inhabitants of the moon. So our technological advancement is a consequence of our fundamental science understanding, which bring us also to the subject of UAP, since we know that in our physics we have the main theory, which is we know the world is quantic, which means it's made of little small particle called quanta, since Max Planck in 1900 needed to use quanta in order to have uh, the, uh, the spectrum, if you want, of the stars called the black body spectrum. So we used this idea of a quanta in 1900, and since then we're sure that the world is quantic in small little parts. And then came the general relativity, which is not a quantum theory, it's a field theory, so it's a kind of continuous theory. And between the two, we can't really make them mix together. It's incompatible, both of them. And we know that if you look at the discoveries of James Webb Telescope and the fact that we're still searching for dark matter, I never found it. Still searching for dark energy. We're still
Do you think it exists? That's the question. Do you think it exists?
I, I think that it was a really good idea to search for the missing matter, but since it's been for so long that they didn't find it, I think it's time to try something else because after 50 years, I think it's because right now, because they never found it, they go to the idea that maybe there are particles, maybe there are heavy particles, or maybe they don't interact with matter. Therefore, that's why we don't see it. But if we have a science which is based on something that we can't measure and we can't make prediction with, we are getting out of the realm of the scientific method and more into the realm of what we believe. So I think, and many people think that we have something missing in our physics. And if you come back to the idea of quantum mechanics giving us the transistor, giving us the ability to go to space, if we manage to actually understand what is our missing physics, maybe a lot of things will open up and will come out of magic and be completely natural and logical. And that's why I think that the UAP subject, which shows some anomalies in terms of motion and speed, and in terms of what is inertia, then it could maybe it's a subject we could an anomaly which could bring us to a better understanding about physics and to continue.
I gotta ask, do you think that it's really aliens or it's these things that
No,
obviously you don't think so?
I don't know, but that's what changed since last time we talked. The vocabulary completely changed. Well, the UAP, it was called unidentified aerial phenomena. Now it's unidentified anomalous phenomena.
They
So we're not
changed
even
it
sure.
again? Damn, I
Yeah,
just got the last one down.
because it's transmedium. There are examples of transmedium UAPs coming from the sea to the atmosphere and maybe to space. So therefore, why be constrained to the atmosphere if it can be eventually transmedium? But the biggest one I think is the NHI, non-human intelligence. To not talk anymore about alien or extraterrestrial. And that's a great idea because if you talk about alien or extraterrestrial, a lot of people are uncomfortable about the subject. At least they are uncomfortable about the subject if it's in our vicinity in our space. If it's very far away, most people don't mind. But and the idea of NHI, non-human intelligence, it came with the advancement and the explosion since last time we talked about the AI, artificial intelligence. And we kind of see that they are kind of our offsprings, right? And that maybe in a few years, they will look like alien to us because they will evolve so quickly. I think it's a great idea.
I
And
think we talked about this our first time when I mentioned Avi Loeb's interview where he was talking about our digital children, sending them into the world to go explore planets. Oh, I had Avi on my show back
yeah,
after I hit a
crazy.
thousand. Um,
Congrats.
he likes the term alien and things of that sort, like lost, but I think you can't really call unidentified aerial phenomena or what we would call the alien subject non-human intelligence because I just think of AI. I think of things that we created ourselves that are not human, but they are intelligent. And now that will be the same classification if we're talking about aliens as well, too, because they're not human the way we identify, but they are intelligent. My issue is when it comes to UAP subject, I'm not a big fan of it because, first of all, nobody is in the academic community I've spoken to has bothered to even want to talk about it besides some scientist friends of mine that I have had on, but they're just not acknowledging it. And I don't know why. Like people that study exoplanets that I speak to, that would be up their alley to start talking about, or at least wondering what's going on with extraterrestrial life. But also, like I said, diving down the history rabbit hole of my country, I have less likely to believe my government when they say something like that. And that's when I have some serious concerns because I do think we can implement a lot of stuff and certain budgeting things when it comes to actually exploration into science, which I'm so pro for. But I don't know what announcing that and having a hearing like that. I don't know if you saw the first hearing that came out, not the NASA one, but the one before that. It was just a hearing of nothing. Did not solidify anybody's respect or confidence in our government. It didn't do anything to in, give us more information about the subject at all. It just people either turned on the TV, oh, that's cool, and then clicked away. Like, because I don't know why that is either. And I think this is a really important time to get a lot of people interested in what we are doing when it comes to space colonization and other things of that sort. But for some reason, it just didn't land correctly.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the exoplanets. Uh, and if you look at the history of exoplanets, uh,
They've like quadrupled over like the past like 20, 30
it,
years.
it began in 1995, the first exoplanet found by Mayer and Kellers in a telescope, which was actually a pretty bad telescope. It's in the south of France, and no astronomers want to actually really use it because even me as a student in astrophysics, I did use the telescope they used in order to find the exoplanet. But they explained in some of their writing that they did hide the fact they were searching for exoplanets because they were afraid of the comments on the. They were afraid that some researcher would find that too exotic and too esoteric because exoplanet, okay, and then what next? Aliens and exoplanet? And at that time in 1995, what was believed, what was accepted is that in the universe, we would probably have bacteria everywhere. But the, I mean, nobody really looked at exoplanets. They were in the history. They said they could make a symposium in a phone booth because there were very few of them. And the method to actually find the exoplanet was published, at least the transit one, was published in the 50s, 1950s. We could have found exoplanets much, much, much earlier. But for some reasons, it was already too exotic to study. But when Mayer and Kellers did find the first exoplanet, and the subject was so hot as a joke because Mayer was in a sabbatical year. I mean, if you're on a hot subject, you don't take a sabbatical year. You avoid it. So it was a student, which called Kellers, Didier Kellers, which found the first anomaly in the light coming from this star, and when that happened, it was possible for other astronomers to look at the stars and to see if the anomaly was still there because the planet didn't go away. So it was something anyone could reproduce with their instruments. And then everybody believed in exoplanet and everybody thought it was super fantastic and everybody was on this subject, except that before 1995, everybody thought it was ridiculous to study the subject. And they changed their opinion after because obviously you could measure it. But in the case of the UAP,
But you had the Robertson panel, and those people were professors or they were people that were blacklisted and shamed and called tinfoil hat for looking into the existence of extraterrestrial life. And one of those members on that panel killed themselves. I've had Larry Hancock, if you know him, for the Scientific Coalition for UAPs. And now you have the government acknowledging that there's UAP existence or there's a unidentified aerial phenomenon. When we have articles and documentation about them writing down from the CIA manuscripts of things about these unidentified aerial phenomena and how you should describe them. What's the weather like in the air? There's plenty of government documents on the CIA website that even talk about that. That's what I don't like is that the government acknowledges it or talks about UAPs and doesn't give you a real explanation of what they're exactly talking about. Just certain instances that they can't describe says that things have moved in different realms of physics than the way we understand them, which I was like, okay, well, that's interesting to me. But there was also, like I said, the Robertson panel. There's a history past of the same thing that's going on now that they're now acknowledging that they shamed before and called you a nut job and people lost their jobs over it.
Yeah, but the shame culture, it is something we need to understand in the framework of the culture of this. Of if you go back to the academics, uh, the the researchers, they work in subspecialties, and so you're a specialist of something, and there's not a lot of specialists of your specialty on Earth, and especially in your country. So they are small communities. And if you make a mistake, or if you study something which is esoteric or risky, and it turns out that it was a loss of time and money, everybody knows it in your community. Therefore, the incentive to take risk is really problematic, because it means that you may lose grants in the future and support in the future. And because we are social animals and we need to have this acceptance and support of your community, if you go against the what is seen as acceptable to your community, obviously it's something you're not willing to take as a risk. And you mentioned Avi Loeb, and in his first book called Extraterrestrial, I think it was that. No, yeah, he said that what is the least happy with in the academics is a lack of risk. Taking risk. And he said that it should be like in your finance when you put some money on the stock exchange. I mean, you put 80% to things that you're going to improve, and to things which are not too risky. You can take 20% to risky things. But right now it's hard, I think, to take the risk because of the human nature, and because of the fact that there are very small communities. But there are ways to get around this. So I'm not surprised that, if you look at Avi Loeb or Gary Nolan, they did their PhD in the 80s. They're nearly 60. I think probably over 60 or maybe near 60 for Gary Nolan. And they are the top of the hill, of the
Gary
hill.
Nolan's at the top of the hill.
Yeah, he's got 50 patents. He's
Oh,
got
I'd
many
say
startups.
he commented on my YouTube channel on a video because he was like, Dick Cheney never had a heart attack. And I just linked the article. I was like, bro, if you can't do a quick Google search, I don't know. I don't trust anything you say. But now I realize he might be respected. I should have probably not said that.
Yeah,
Whoops.
because I do follow him on X, and what I like in him is when he says something wrong, and people come in and say, "Oh, that's wrong," and he say, "I stand corrected."
He didn't
So
say that to me.
he really,
That's
but
fine. No, I
maybe
get what
it
you're
was in
saying about
written form.
it was in a YouTube comment.
Okay,
I
because
forgot what
he's
video he commented on. It had to be something because I've talked to a lot of those guys who do the Galileo project. Which I think is really, really important. I think especially the I don't know if you know what the Galileo project is.
yeah, it's the one from Evilab. Yeah,
Avi Loeb, Massimo Teodorani has been on the show multiple times. Those guys I respect because like they'll actually talk to you about these subjects. Whether I know they have a whole panel of people on there, like Nick Pope's on there from Ancient Aliens. I've spoken to him too. Michael Shermer's on there. I'm not his biggest fan, but he's a skeptic, which I just think you need that influx of people on a panel, especially if you're going to talk about something like researching extraterrestrial life. You need to have a mixed bag of characters on there, people that are willing to challenge your theories and your ideas. My whole belief is that if someone's researching something, I don't think you should shame them for researching something, even though if you might not agree or call it science. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff that's fringe theories. You could say dark matter could be fringe theory because we don't know if it exists or not. But to me, I'm in belief that it does. I don't think we should pull out funding about it. I just think we're going to need something to help us discover it. And I think that thing is AI. think they're trying to recreate how the Big Bang might have happened. I had a friend on here who's a reader in the UK about this stuff, and she works about dark matter and all these types of subjects. And she's like, we're just there's a simulation. It keeps going over and over again, trying to put out this theory of I might be butchering what she said, but trying to create how the Big Bang might have happened. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds important, but I think technology has to get to a point to be able to get us over that hump, to get us there. Because I don't think with our capacity, we need tools, and those are AI could be a useful tool. It can also be a useful companion, like Avi Loeb says about digital children going out into the world. But we don't have enough things in the world of science or in just topics of conversation today that deal with understanding another person's perspective. We don't have that. And that whether that's an academic field or a route someone wants to pursue, if you mentioned a great point, being tossed into the field of esoteric, I some of the subjects like the UAP stuff, I don't consider that esoteric. I just think it's controversial because for some reason there's a bad stigma behind it. And that's why they rebranded the name. And I guess they just rebranded it again. But it's you can change it as much as you want. It's just the initial subject matter. For some people, it's been taken and used and commercialized, and then it just becomes this whole mess of things that like researchers will just not even look at, even though there might be a lot of evidence to support something of its point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
If you disagree,
The
feel free. I'm not going to yell at you.
No, 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 no. The skeptic aspect. Uh,
They're heartless
for,
people.
yeah, yeah. Well, the problem on the subject is you have people who either believe it's something unusual or people who believe it's something just normal, and they already know what they believe in. Uh, and that's a problem in itself. For my part, I actually don't know what it is, and I don't care what it is. What I'm interested into is the inquiry and the fact to solve the problem. It's like playing a video game or MMORPG. I prefer to enjoy the path, right? The leveling experience, try to decipher the problem that to what it is really. Because if you have an intuition that it is this or that, we know that confirmation bias is going to push you to actually select such aspect of the equation. And what I find interesting with AI, like you said, that it may be a way, a post-biological way to go into space, but it's also a way maybe to help making research without the cultural um, and the stigmatization and without the limitation, the psychological limitation that we have. If we manage to grow AI, making research without our limitations, that could be an advancement, that's for sure. But this this idea that people know what it is and search to push it is so weird because for example, if you look like the main media, one reason the researcher don't go into it is that main media very often ask for normal astronomers about this subject. So they ask SETI, and they've got people like Seth Shostak. I don't know if you know him. Seth Shostak is one of the main public relations of the City Institute, or people like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Those people are actually convinced that there's nothing interesting here to study. And when they are interviewed in video or into magazine and publications and articles, they maybe not realizing, but their behavior is really trying to stigmatize the people who want to actually study that, and they use arguments which are, in my view, unscientific. For example, Seth Shostak, in one of the articles he wrote for The Economist, or I don't remember which big magazine, he said that the subject is so ridiculous because this UFO, they would come from outer space, from far away, traveling all this space just to crash on Earth. This is ridiculous, he said. But if you look at the way we send probes to Mars and other planets, the probability where we crash the most by so far is when we enter the atmospheric of this planet. That's where we're losing our probes. That's not in space, and those people know exactly that, but they would still use arguments which will convey the beliefs. And if you go into the City Institute and if you look at the webpage and the mission statement, it says a sentence like, "Where will you be when life is found beyond?" Something like that. And you've got the word beyond, because they are convinced that we couldn't find something intelligent there. But also when Seshostak say, why would alien would go so far away and to arrive on Earth and crash? It completely forgets, conveniently, that we just changed the framework of study by not explicitly talking about aliens and extraterrestrial, but by talking about non-human intelligence. So we don't know, and I don't know, if this phenomena is real. I suspect it may be real, and if it is, it can be earthbound, but they don't listen to that. They don't they don't want to talk about that because it doesn't serve the narrative. This summer, I did listen to the podcast of Neil deGrasse Tyson and invited David Spergel, which was the head of the independent committee for the study of UAP by NASA. And he was with a friend of him, Neil deGrasse Tyson. And the interview was during an hour. And he began by saying, "Oh, David, how the hell did you manage to find yourself in this situation?" I mean, for an hour long, he was making fun of David Spergel, which is a cosmologist from the Princeton University, about him taking the responsibility to look at a way to use science in order to try to advance our understanding of what it is or what it is not. And the fact that it went for an hour and it was repetitive in the way they were laughing and they were laughing at him is a kind of a harassment in itself. And it doesn't help other scientists to try to take the risk to investigate the subject in a scientific way.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't engage the conversation. It doesn't move it farther forward. I actually literally just had this conversation like 2 weeks ago. I had a skeptic on my show. We were talking about the UAP subject. Eventually led into the UAP subject, and he just goes, "Well, I actually am writing something new about the UAP subject and debunking that as well too." And I just kind of went, "Well, why? What do you mean debunking UAPs? You consider that and the same thing with paranormal? I mean, it would be stupid to think we're the only people in the universe, right?" And he goes, "Well, the UAP people are tinfoil hat. They believe this and this and that." And I go, "What I notice about you guys is that you guys have a bias." He goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "If I show you content that's a UAP subject, and then I showed you content that's a skeptic show, what would you view?" And he goes, "Well, I'd be probably more inclined to go with the skeptic side." I go, "So you would consider them fact and the other ones not, despite everybody having their own talking points. You wouldn't give both the time?" And he goes, "I mean, I like to stay impartial." I'm like, "Yeah, but you just said you basically have a bias in the skeptic stuff." So that's the whole point, is like, if you're not going to look at the evidence, look at what people present, then you're just going to find your talking points. And it's one thing I don't like about Neil deGrasse Tyson is he has his talking points. He's become a media figure more than a scientist now. There's on the opposite side, it's the same thing. Tom DeLonge, all that type of stuff, they become UAP is their whole personality. And then there is no more, real actual looking at something and trying to decipher what it is. It just becomes like everything has to be some type of UAP experience, or there's aliens, or they have bodies or something like that. I don't know, because I've seen so many people post up clips of bodies of aliens, and I'm pretty sure it's from a movie I saw like from the 2000s or something like that, where I'm like, you're not linking to where you're finding this. You're just posting pictures with some weird cryptic quote. That does not help the discussion. What you're doing is you're dividing people more apart, and then you're creating Twitter arguments and fights. And that's not good for the discussion either. So I understand now where academics don't want to touch the subject, because it's a minefield right now. I think that'll clear with time. But I like your take on things. I think we're agreeing in the same aspect of things. We might have different ideas of like I always think it's government tech that's way advanced is probably a lot of this stuff. But also I don't ever throw the alien subject out of the loop. I have too many friends that believe in it, astrophysicists, radio astronomers, all it's to me, I just haven't seen it myself. But if someone believes it and they experience something, I'm not going to sit there and tell them that they're wrong and they're an idiot. That doesn't do anything for anybody. I could have a person on here explain their whole experience for an hour and a half and just laugh at them the whole time. What would that get me out of life? Nothing. But that's what you see when we talk about intellectuals that are when I mean intellectual, Neil deGrasse Tyson is an intellectual. He's considered a high class intellectual and a media figure. When people watch his podcast, like you did with that one guy, did he give him the time? No. Did he make fun of him? Yes. Do you consider him respectable? Probably not after that, but he still gets views anyway. And that's the area we don't have a platform for discussions. And I think that's what the scientific community honestly needs. I've seen a lot of lectures, but even we don't need debates anymore. We just need people that are open communication. Open science is a very good avenue with academics. But I have a lot of friends who know how I work, know how I think, and they want to talk to me like how you're talking to me. And that does the best service when we can actually have a discussion about certain things. And I might be ranting a lot, but it happens. And that's the thing I think that society needs to get people to these discussions about science and the actual important questions we need to be asking. And we don't have that on any platform out there on regular television, which people probably still use more than they do podcasts and other options.
Mm. In what you said about open science and maybe the fact to stay humble in front of what we may not know about everything, we can also use the history of science to inform us. And in 1803, in French Normandy, near Paris, the at that time, scientists believed that meteorites wasn't from space, that it was from Earth, because the idea of something coming from space was too esoteric at the time. And in 1803, above the city of L'Aigle, a big meteor came and it disintegrated into 3,000 pieces. And obviously, the whole city saw the stuff, but there wasn't any big scientist in this city because it's quite kind of small city. And at that time, a researcher called Jean-Sébastien Biot came from Paris. He went to the city because the big problem of UAP, it's rare. It doesn't happen in your lab. You
Unless
can't
you're in
just
Alaska, then it happens all the time.
yeah. So how are you going to deal with a subject which is rare? Well, you try to increase your collective intelligence. You try to increase your number of sensors. And it happens that humans have sensors that got eyes, ears. So it happened that in 1803, many humans in this city saw all these shooting stars, if you want, up to meteorites on the ground. So this scientific scientist, he came from Paris, and he went to interview all these people. He asked, which angle did it went from, and how quick was that, and what was the weather condition? Because at the time, the theory was that meteorites were ejected by volcanoes, except there wasn't any volcano in the vicinity. Or it was a kind of condensation when there's a bad weather, and then suddenly it condensates in a rock and it falls. Except the weather condition was really good, so it couldn't be a weather condition. And he went back and he wrote a paper, and through the contribution of all these citizen science, all those people were at the right place at the right time, he managed to convince that actually this thing is those meteorites, which are just rocks, come from outer space. And we have a lot of other examples where we know that we must begin to learn to be humble into what we believe in, what we don't know yet. Another example are the sprites. Do you know about the sprites? You know what are sprites?
The fairies?
No.
Oh, well, that's
It's
another word
it,
for fairies.
if you open the report from NASA about the UAP, at the page number 4, I think. First, it's the kind of the content, and first is a picture of the team of the UAP investigation team, and after you've got a full page, and you've got a red sprite. Sprites are rare events which happen above clouds when there's a storm. It's actually beautiful to see if you look at it. This picture they put on the report is beautiful, and it's been reported by people since more than a century. The problem is it's rare and it's very short in time, few milliseconds to few seconds. So nobody really believed the people who said they saw weird red figures or tree-like things above the clouds. And the first time it was found by a university by mistake. They had a high sensitivity camera, which went by mistake operating during the full night. And on 2 frames, there was something weird. And it was monochrome, it wasn't color. And in the middle of 90s, the NASA has been interested by that, say, well, maybe there's something to it. And they managed to take in 1994, I think, the first picture of a huge red sprite above the clouds. And we have other subjects like that, which doesn't happen, which are rare, and which are very short in time. For example,
Lightning ball phenomena?
yeah, well, I'm not sure exactly if it's true, the lightning bolt, but probably there's still some discussion about that. But the gamma ray burst. In the 60s, the United States had some spy satellites in order to look at potential enemy enemy foes on the planet, on geopolitical planet. And they had those spies, the satellite spy, I think it's called Vela, V-A-L-A, and they had many sensors on it, and one of it is a gamma sensor. Do you know why the United States would try to look at the Earth and see if there would be a gamma ray emission? It's
Probably
because,
nuclear
yeah,
weapons, something with nuclear
yeah,
weapons.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a subproduct of a nuclear fission, a gamma ray. So if you've got a nuclear test, you will have a gamma ray burst into the. So there's a techno signature to a nuclear test, at least a fission nuclear test.
Lets you know if your enemies are testing nuclear weapons.
Exactly. But in that process, the military began to see that, oh, weird, there are some gamma ray bursts in the sky. And it's very short, few milliseconds, few seconds again. And they did keep this information hidden for many years. And eventually, they did release the information because probably maybe the spy were known or whatever, and it wasn't dangerous for them to reveal it. It wasn't an advantage to keep it. And then the Astronomical Society and the academics knew that there were gamma ray bursts in the sky, and they began to study it, and they found an explanation, which would be a collision of neutron stars, which is one possible death of a star depending on their mass. And but the point here is the military had information that the academics didn't have. Why? Because they have so many satellites and they are searching for targets. And in their gathering of data, they may capture things which are not, which may be anomalous, And what I think is very different from when we talked about last time is that in May of this year, when this committee of independent study gathered, the researcher called Dr. Kirkpatrick, which is the head of the AERO, All Anomalous Reporting Office, which depends of the DoD, Department of Defense. During this gathering, which was actually, it took 4 hours, and most of it was not interesting. But he saw the famous orb, the spheres. Did you see that? Over Mosul. Did you see that part?
I might have.
And that is crazy. And what is even more crazy is that no main media reported on this. So what he said is, well, I'm the director of the AERO. Okay, so I'm called by the NASA research team to report what I've been doing. Okay, what we've been doing, we've been gathering data from different offices. And what we see the most as a testimony are spheres. And those spheres, he gave an ID card of it. He gave a PowerPoint presentation. And one of the slides was the idea of the identification of the spheres. And what he said is, we see those all over the planets making very interesting maneuvers. So very interesting maneuvers, it's probably not following the wind. It may be intelligent maneuver. And he said there are 1 to 4 meter size spheres. They give the visual aspect, either silver, translucid, or it gave the dynamic of it. It can be hypersonic. It can go up to Mach 2, twice the sound of speed. It gave the radar frequency to which they've seen it. So radar and the infrared signature they've seen. And he gave also the height distribution, meaning the number of spheres they've seen depending on the altitude. And you can't give a high distribution if you don't have enough events. They probably have many events in order to do a height distribution. And they also gave the map on the Earth, but he said that the map is correlated to the military of the US. So it's maybe not, it's maybe a bias in terms of their localization. That is super interesting because it's the first time I see that. Because it's either true or it's wrong. It's either false or true in terms of logical thinking. If it's false, then we need to understand why the government you don't trust is making such a disinformation, for which purpose. And if it's true, it is the start of a possibility to find those things, because he gave the position, the altitude, the size, the dynamic, the different wavelength they've seen into. And it may be now, if it's true, just a matter of time until another organization, maybe NASA eventually in the coming years, or maybe other organization are confirming that, yeah, there are some spheres which have intelligent behavior up to Mach 2 and moving on the atmosphere of the Earth. And that didn't happen before. We didn't have an ID card to search for. It's an invitation card. You give the morphology, you give the dynamic, you give the wavelength, and if you have the means to find them, try to find them. And that is completely, we didn't have that 3 years ago. And I think it's a game changing. What I don't understand is why would the Department of DoD would reveal that? I mean, I understand they're bound to to the will of the politicians, and the politicians want this to be transparent because of the laws and stuff which happened. But if I was working for the DoD, I would never reveal such a thing because I would try to understand what it is. Because when you say making very interesting maneuvers up to Mach 2, there's also another information I forgot. He said there's no exhaust. It's like, and I've seen that in infrared also, which we would see the exhaust in infrared. And our physics says that when we have action reaction, if you want to move in this direction, you need to push something in the other direction. And it seems like this object doesn't comply to what we know of inertia, mass inertia. That if you've got something which doesn't move, it will continue not to move if there's no force in it. But this may be this is really strong and interesting.
Do you think it's true or false? I mean, I can give you if we go back to the example I mentioned about the Robertson panel. Historically, during times like the Cold War, when we started seeing actual UAP reports, if you go on CIA's website, they'll have sketches and drawings, things of this sort. Many talks about UAPs and subjects of that sort. A lot of that is misinformation on purpose because a lot of them believe that Russia had invaded their intelligence organizations and they were printing up false reports. That is documented. That's like you can just search that up. It's not going to be conspiratorial. It's well known that they were planting misinformation on purpose. You talk about the DoD talking or releasing something like this, why would they do that? I guarantee you it's not a false report in the sense of like that whatever the government has, they're not going to give you the actual thing that they're really working on. They might give you a sliver, they might give you something that'll just throw you off and like, what is this supposed to mean? It's kind of like when everyone released their UAP reports, I think it was 2 years ago. USA only released like a 9-page thing, and 5 pages of it was like a summary or the introduction or something like that. While every other country released thousands of files on UAPs. The government's just, if the DoD releases something, any of these governments, from what I've learned through just historically of looking like COINTELPRO, horrible government operations that have happened in our nation's history, a lot of the stuff that their initial letter is, it sounds like, wow, that's crazy. But then you actually dig down deeper and you get to like what would be fast forward 9 months ahead. Those documents don't reflect the little lie they told you at the top. Now, I'm pretty sure. I mean, in my like when they were doing that UAP hearing, for instance, all those people talking about that whatever in the what is it? The guy said that it didn't move in the way that we know objects to move in today's physics or something like that. And then they kept saying, we'll talk about this in the skiff. Do you remember that? The little lovely skiff they kept mentioning, which is a side room where you talk about things you can't disclose for national security reasons.
Yeah, that was about the reverse engineering and the bodies
Yeah.
that David Grush.
So when they said that, I'm glad they're doing it behind closed doors. I'm actually hoping that they're actually discussing some of this stuff behind closed doors because at least they're discussing it. Yes, I would like to know about it, but at the same time, if your government's talking about it openly in front of every single person or they're releasing something openly in front of everybody, it's not that a politician's bending their hand. It's because they're doing something to get you to back off a little bit because they are investigating other things. What I've learned more about my government is that you can't really examine the politicians' power in anything. Look at the intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI, and all these organizations as their own. And I can show you plenty of documentation. If anybody who's listening to my show has known that for the JFK stuff, that's been verifiably proven. All these agencies talk trash on each other. It's how our government runs. They're headed by their directors. So like, if you look at like Bill Nelson in charge of NASA or whatever he's in charge of, I don't think he's like doing this on purpose, thinking that, oh my God, I'm lying to all the American people. I don't think that at all. I just think he's probably seen some things, whether it's true information or misinformation, to make him feel this way. I mean, think about it. If you were working for the government, for instance, and I came up to you and I was in charge of like a top secret organization that has like Area 54, we're going to go that one. Because remember, they lied to us about Area 51. They said it didn't exist, and it did. I don't know if you remember that. Maybe that was just a cultural thing over here. But if I came up to you and said, "Hey, I had these documents that I got here," and I was going to be like a whistleblower, which is a thing, and I gave it to you and showed you this information, you'd be like, "Oh my God, the government is up to some crazy stuff." And then you go and try and say it out there, but you don't have the documents to back it up. You know what I mean? You're not lying about what you saw. I showed you this. But
Yeah, but
you
this
see what I'm
time,
saying?
this time, yeah, I understand what you said, but this time it is too precise. I mean,
Yeah,
the ID card is complete, the size, the dynamic, the different wavelength we need to look at. So in the coming years, we're going to say, well, we looked at it, it doesn't exist.
I hope not. That would suck. Why would they say it
Well,
doesn't
but
exist?
yeah, then why would they give such a complete ID card?
That's
I
what I'm.
would, I would,
They
I
give
would
you a
give
piece
something
of the
fuzzy.
cake.
I would give something fuzzy. Therefore, you won't be able to be put in contradiction. You
It
wouldn't.
makes it complicated when you examine the moves and motives that our government does. I'll tell you that much. It'll make you go nuts. Do you think it's real though? Do you think it's honest or do you think it's false?
I don't know. What I think is we have now the technological capability to verify if it's true or false. Uh, Granted, it's pretty small, 3 to 4 meters. It's not big, but you talked about Avilab and is building a kind of dome, a small dome where it's got a lot of sensors in order to look at the sky and also use AI machine learning in order to automatically analyze what's happening in the sky. I think it's a matter of years, max, maybe a few years, uh, in which we can say for sure this object, we can see it or we can't see it. And, and, and I don't think the DoD would have taken the risk to invent such a story because we would say, hey, this was completely stupid and it didn't exist. Why would they give such a precise ID card? And anyway, what I found very interesting into the approach of the David Spergel into this independent study commissioned by NASA, and that I learned from the podcast he did with Neil deGrasse Tyson, he said, well, I think it's a great opportunity for citizen science. These events are rare, anomalous events. And in astronomy, we know about rare events. For example, this month, or in October month, well, we are in October, there's an amateur, astronomer amateur, who found the first collision between two exoplanets. And it wasn't found by an academic, it was found by an amateur. Why? Because it's rare. And there are more amateurs than there are professionals. And if you look at the discoveries of comets, discoveries of supernova, very often it's because of amateurs. There are more numerous than the academics. And the proposition of David Spergel is actually pretty interesting and cunning. He said, if we accept that those are real anomalous events and that it's rare, we know that there are 8 billion people on Earth. We know there's 5.5 billion smartphones. On smartphones, you've got gyroscopes, you've got accelerometers, you have electromagnetism, so the electric and magnetic fields are measured. And you've got also the gravity, which can be measured. His idea in complement to a more rigorous, with more powerful tools, is to use massively distributed observation with smartphones in order to try to spot anomalous events. So how would that work? When you talk about, at the start, you were saying about videos that you couldn't trust and stuff, and you're right. If you've got a picture or a video of something, if you just have one video, one picture of something, it's extremely difficult to say anything about it because you don't know if it's really near, like a bug in front of the objective of the camera, of it's far and very luminous but far. And but if you use collective intelligence, what we could do is, and what is proposed by NASA, and that probably Bill Nelson from NASA is going to do, is to take this UAP enigma as an opportunity for citizen science by developing an application for smartphone, which actually already exists. There's a company called Enigma Lab, I think that's the name, who already created one of such application. But I would prefer NASA to do their own because I'd like to see exactly where the data goes. So the principle is, imagine there's something you don't know in the sky. You can make a game of that. Oh, there's something in the sky, we don't know what it is. There's so many things in the sky. There are satellites, there are ULM, very light stuff, and there are skydivers. I mean, there's so many things in the sky nowadays. Well, you would take your smartphone and you would take a picture in the direction of that, what you don't know what it is. And the idea of the app is because you collect the gyroscope, you know in which direction you're looking at. So if there are many people looking at the same event, we will know it because the different angles are going to cross into a region of the sky. And through we call that triangulation. So if you've got at least two observers, you know the distance of the event. If there's only one observer, you can't tell it. But then the app would show events which may potentially be interesting because there are many people looking exactly in the same direction. That wouldn't say that it's anomalous. Again, it can be a Chinese balloon, it can be a Chinese, what is it called? Yeah. But it would start a culture where people would try to look at the sky and try to decipher what's in it, and maybe with time to actually find anomalous event in it. An analogy could be like geocaching. I don't know if you know the geocaching where people go out and they play to find caches in different places. And if I go back to the event of 1803 with the extraterrestrial nature of the meteorites, it makes sense because there are many more people, right? And I think it's a promising way to actually to find something and to have big data gathering and having some machine learning over it to try to pop up the events which are potentially interesting. And this approach through the gyroscope haven't been tried before, and it will work only if there's enough people, right, who play the game.
I think you're dealing with a couple of problems there. I mean, the application, I've heard of that happening or someone being able to, it's like a UAP reporting thing. You can report if you see something weird in the sky and then it gets sent to. I think that would be a good idea, but I just think you got to get over the hump of citizen science. People don't accept that. I know a lot of people that consider themselves citizen science researchers, and I think that there's plenty out there and plenty of evidence to show that they do exist, but a lot of the academic community does not accept citizen science. It's
Well,
ivory
it's
tower
not
syndrome of a
it,
sort.
in astronomy. It's not true because we actually work with amateur because they find so many things that the professional don't find because the professional they don't look at the sky.
I
They
agree
hire
with you.
time.
I agree with you. But I'm saying if you go to Twitter right now and put up, do you accept citizens doing science or citizen science as a thing, you're going to get a wide swath of people that are going to be saying no. And that's just and I've learned that I would consider myself a historian, but nobody would consider me that because I don't have a PhD in it, even though I've spoken to people that were alive at the time and experienced it themselves to interview them to be able to tell you the information on that. But from what I've learned from academics is they just don't accept that. And people don't accept it either. If some person who's a citizen scientist went out and you got to look at the examination of the topic too. Exoplanets colliding into each other is a lot different than if you're talking about UAPs existing or aerial
But
phenomena or aliens
but
existing.
UAP could be Chinese balloons. It's probably many things UAP
Yeah.
in this category is probably many phenomena. And it would be already fantastic if you know that over your own country, you've got Chinese spying on your military sites. I mean, it will be a win already.
It's been happening for
So,
a while. They just
yeah,
acknowledged it
so
for the first time.
let's play the game, and you will probably find interesting and useful things for your country and mine, but maybe.
Hold on. Can you
And
imagine
may,
if that was the Roswell incident? Is that Chinese spy balloon? That's what they found when they said they caught a weather balloon or some crap. It was really a Chinese spy
uh,
balloon.
at that time, it's not possible because they couldn't have they weren't in a very bad shape in 1947. The Chinese.
I just think, like, for instance, there's a lot of things like Area 51 existing. That was a thing for a while that a lot of people were saying Area 51 existed, and everyone was saying, no, that's a conspiracy theory. And then next, thing you know, the base does exist. There's, when you look at something like that, obviously, like if you're trying to prove something to be something you want to research into or something that would be smart enough to research into, you're trying to find a history of if it's happened in the past. So it gives you some basis to go on your investigation of like maybe we should try and find another event or look for something of that sort. But then if there isn't an event like that before, like let's take the UAP subject, it has an event in the past. If you talk about like just the government wondering what these or having drawings of saucers, but I also got to look at it from a point of I don't know if the government's being honest with their full transparency on so many aspects of things. And like I said, it depends on the weight of the topic. If you're talking about time travel, dark matter is not a topic I would consider fringe, even though people say, well, it doesn't exist or it does exist. To me, it's not a fringe subject because there's a lot about space that we don't know.
Astronomers believe into dark matter. That's a problem, but they believe for 70 years of it, and we still haven't found anything.
Exactly. Like I wouldn't be saying, honestly, I'm not going to stop somebody's research funding if they're because I have friends that research that topic. But if you bring that thing up there and you say like dark matter or something of that subject, you know, if you say like, "Oh, I'm not blaming you because that we haven't discovered it yet, whether it exists or not, I'm not blaming you for that. We might be limited on our technology to be able to discover it." They get upset at you. They go, "Holy!" They get mad. I've gotten people mad at me like I was discrediting how far we've come with science. I was like, "No, we're just not there yet to be able to discover that if it exists." But that's like I said, with academics, it's a little bit of a different subject I've learned. Like I can talk to you about certain subjects, and I could talk to my friend who will just try and debunk UAP stuff all the time and call lightning ball phenomena. He's still open to listening on certain subjects, but then it leaves his bias point. And when it leaves someone's bias point, whether they're academic or not, I have academic friends that won't even entertain the UAP subject, won't even entertain space colonization because they think it's ridiculous. But then I have friends that are all about it. So then it's like when you start to find that everyone's got their certain points and individual parts. For instance, we talk about space colonization. If you talk about sending robots up there, that's where some of them start bowing out. They think that's ridiculous. I'm like, wait, so it's more smart to send a person up there? And they're like, yeah. I was like, right. So it's like I'm playing Minesweeper and I'm gonna end up clicking something I'm not supposed to and blow up, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, I do believe that citizen science is powerful and may actually bring something. And one reason I believe that is that when we talked 3 years ago, I wasn't really aware of something called OSINT. OSINT is open source intelligence. So this term, it means it's not open source as a software. It's mean trying to have intelligence, trying to have an inquiry, a detective story, if you want, through open sources.
Yeah, like academic journals, media, and all that.
Yeah. And before, few years earlier, nobody really believed that citizen journalism could actually solve big geopolitical investigation into what a big power have done into a conflict or not. But this changed pretty much lately with a website called Bellingcat. Bellingcat. Did you know about this website?
Billing
So,
cat.
yeah. So it's a contraction of bell, putting a bell on the cat, bell in cat. And it's been developed by a British called Elliot Higgins. And this British, in 2014, over Ukraine, a plane was taken down Inquiry went into trying to decipher if it was the Ukrainian or the Russian who took the plane down. The inquiry was more or less solved by citizens instead of a country. And Elliot Higgins were instrumental into using open source informations like what are on social media to, but not only geo informations, into showing and retracing the motion of the missile launcher. So it did manage to retrace where the missile launcher came from. It did manage also to retrace the soldiers which were inside the missile launcher. All this through open information. And because the information was open, any journalist could check it because the information is not secret. So what you're claiming, you can look at it and decide by yourself if it's true or not. And it brings back the idea of the detective culture, the inquiry, and trying to solve by yourself what is the reality. And I'm not surprised it comes from the British, because Elliot Higgins is British. If you look at the great detective stories in humanity, you've got Sherlock Holmes, you've got Agatha Christie with Hercule Poirot, and they're all British. And you know why they're all British? The people who made these detective stories so famous, because
Well, I would say because their government has been keeping a lot of secrets from them. They also don't talk about conspiracies like we do. Over here, if you talk about conspiracy, you'll get eye rolls. But for some reason, all the best, interesting, most government kind of weird stuff has always been from people from the England or another country in the UK or something like that. And I was like, they explained it to me. We don't handle conspiracies like you guys do. We know that the government does some crazy stuff and we've learned that. And I'm like, that's fantastic.
the Industrial Revolution began in London, in Europe. And what happened overnight, well, is that people knew each other in villages. People were living in villages and everybody knew everybody. And then, because of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of people went to populate the cities. And then suddenly, a lot of people who don't know each other were in the same vicinity. And so you've got a kind of anonymization because not you couldn't know every citizen of London by heart. And the crime began to rise up. And then the first police force has been created in the city. And the first one was in London because it was the biggest city at the time, and that the crime rate were growing up. But what I find very interesting when I go back to the OSINT culture, open source intelligence, if you look at it through the Bellingcat website and through also YouTube, for example, you will see that the culture of investigation and collective intelligent investigation to try to decipher what is true or false into misinformations and into fake news,
Yeah, I don't
deep
like that.
fakes, and so on.
I don't like
You
that.
don't. I mean, go. I mean, when you have the time, go into the Bellingcat. It's crazy because it's Bellingcat. It tells you. It tells you the investigation, how they made the investigation for each story of or each event. They're mainly about geopolitical problems they are investigating. But what is crazy is how they solve problems, or at least how they try to find the solution. And what really surprised me is the power of the big data of open sources informations. For example, we have so many satellites which are open science. For example, when I talk about the Ukraine 2014 plane takedown, Russia was suggested that it was a Ukrainian launcher who did it. They provided a satellite picture from the military satellite. And Elliot Higgins and Bellingcat said, well, this picture couldn't be taken at the time you are claiming because the vegetation didn't match this time period. Because we as a citizen have access to satellites with data on it, with extremely detailed information and picture of the Earth anytime, anywhere. And we can by ourselves verify if the picture which have been provided as and claimed for this time frame is current or not with all the other pictures taken by other satellites. And this we didn't have before. And we have access to, I mean, when you look at UAP, we have access to all the flights which are in the airspace with Flight 24. You can go to Flight 24. You can go anytime you want in the past and see exactly which planes with the transponders were present in the sky. But you can also know exactly if a Starlink satellite has been launched or any satellite, because it's mandatory for any launch into space to be declared for security reasons. All this is also public data. And if you want to go back into the past, maybe 3 years ago at a certain time, and you want to know the weather conditions there 3 years ago over your city, you can go back into this period and exactly what the weather was it, because it's available online. And if you maybe suspect it's a satellite which is rotating around the Earth, well, there's a public database for that. And you can know exactly which satellite there's currently above your head, and you can also go back in time. And even some informations that we have, which is public, interfere with information which are not public. For example, in the Bellingcat, there's an article about when Iran did attack Saudi Arabia into one of their oil refinery, place where they refine the oil. And they managed to show that on a public satellite called Sentinel there are many satellites which are imaging the Earth. And the way they're imaging the Earth is they send a radar pulse, like bats. They send a radar pulse and it's bouncing on the Earth and it comes back. And then they provide the imagery for this region. And it's a great way to do imagery because it's not dependent on the weather. So if you've got clouds, you still have imagery. Like the bats don't care about the clouds either. They managed to see in Bellingcat that from time to time, there's an interference into the data. And they looked at it and they understood by doing an inquiry that they had the information on the public data of all the Patriot systems. Because Patriot systems, when they are into operation, normally they are into operation when they think they could be attacked. A zone could be attacked, so you take your Patriot system and you send radar pulse in the air in order to try to find projectiles which could come at you, and then send your Patriot missiles. And this was interfering with the public data. So if you go into the Bellingcat website, you can know exactly the location of all the Patriot systems because they are available on the public data, and you can go back in time to it. And just to give you another example, so if you take OpenStreetMap, it's a public mapping system, but it's well beyond a map. It's a geographical database where you describe what you see and you give the location, latitude, longitude of the location. And through this geolocation database, they create maps. But if you have a picture and if you can see on the picture, I don't know, maybe there's a fountain and maybe there are rails next to the fontaine. You can go on an OpenStreetMap, or at least on tools that Bellingcat developed, and you can ask in the city on the place where you think you want to find a place from the picture you received. You tell them, well, show me all the places with rails and a fontaine next to it. And it will tell you directly, this is all the points where in this vicinity there are rails, like train rails, and a fontaine next to it. So and all this data is public, and you can then cross-reference different public sources and have some really impressive way to find information, even with very limited information. Some people, for example, play games like GeoSetters, I think, where you just have a picture from Google Street View, and they still manage to find what it is in which country and in which location. They've never been there, never been there. But by using open source information and the right tool and the right methods, you can solve a lot of mysteries. Like if you know the if you know the if you can look at the length of a shadow, if you know where and at what day the picture was taken, you can know which hour, right? So if you miss some information through public data or even some physics with the shadows, you can actually continue to solve the puzzle. And what I find interesting is there's a culture around this, around Doesn't, which is growing rather quickly, of people who are finding themselves in a situation where it's so difficult to, I mean, the digital culture is a big problem because it created easily all the facts, all the difficulty we have to know what is real or not. But in the same time, it is creating all the tools where we can decipher what is really real or not. And it depends to us to develop this culture where we systematically or where we like to investigate and not be sure about things. So my hope is that the OSINT culture, which is right now more geared toward geopolitical conflicts, but my hope is that the OSINT culture with the public science culture, because it is growing the public citizen science. Why? Because many governments on earth want to justify the money they give to academics. And one of the ways to justify the money is to develop citizen science, but also it is to develop people to the culture of the scientific method in order to not fall into a world where people accept all the fake news which will be there and are not able to develop the critical thinking which is necessary to not be a victim of all the fakes which is around it. So I think that's an opportunity, this STEM science and OSINT, to the study of UAP, and then we'll see what NASA is going eventually to do. But I wouldn't be surprised if within few years we find something new, whatever it is. it, maybe extraterrestrial, maybe just earthbound, but something new. And that's why I'm pretty confident and pretty optimistic into the way things are turning.
I don't think we agree on that subject, but that's fine. I don't think anybody should be in charge of labeling things misinformation or disinformation because I think it gets stuck into the political realms and it becomes that skeptic versus conspiracy
Yeah, but
discussion again.
that's why we need to develop the culture of systematic. I mean,
Do you know who Roman Yampolsky, I think his name is? He studies AI, existential risk, specifically. We had a conversation about this, and he brought up this one AI that could predict every, thing, basically make every move, every decision that needs to be made would be done through this AI. And he was very pessimistic when I talked to him. I said, "Why are you so pessimistic about AI?" He goes, "Because there's nobody in this world that would not program their own bias into one of these machines." He's like, if you have an AI that runs your politics, you're just gonna have people in. Well, what would you consider? Let me ask you a question. What would you consider conspiracy? What would you consider a misinformation subject?
The bias is the data set that we give to the AI, because the way we program it is through the data. And there too, I'm pretty optimistic, because if you talk to me about AI 1 year ago, or in November when ChatGPT burst into the scene, and then humanity saw ChatGPT and said, "What the fuck? What's happening?" And the state of open source at this time, I mean, I was worried that open source wouldn't be able to be strong enough in front of mega corporation bringing the AI. And as a young person, either you use those AI or you are far behind and you're going to be unemployed. And if mega corporations are the only one having those AI, we don't know how they are trained and we don't know their bias. But if you look at a website called Hugging Face, do you know about Hugging Face?
I don't, but I just have to say you're bringing up some really good examples. The issue is that there's no way that something this powerful, the government wouldn't get their hands on it, and that's when it becomes a problem. You see my point of it that
But if it's
there's
open source and if you have a data set,
again, like that's like the guy who that's like the two people who had the idea for the water powered car, and then they both die in mysterious circumstances. One of them might not have been our country though. One of them was probably Russia. I don't know if you ever heard that guy before. He got poisoned at a Cracker Barrel. You can look that up. That's actually proven. He did get poisoned, but they blamed it on Russians that he was meeting with at a Cracker Barrel. But he had an idea for a water powered car. And it's like those things, you know how they always say they got the cure for cancer and they're never gonna. I don't go that conspiratorial on things, but there's always something that's really, really good for society, and it's either taken by the government or there's something that makes it that just it poof, it stops. You know what I'm saying? When something like this that's open source, there's not a way that that's going to be able to be implemented into the lives of every single citizen because the government would never, at least our government over here, would not allow that. They would not allow that control. There's already, I don't know if you remember this, but this was probably less than a year ago. They were trying to create a disinformation board, a misinformation board over here in the United States, which was just a couple of members in our government that would go on the internet and label things fake news or real. There's no person that can do that. What you're suggesting is a device that's being able to kind of look through information and be able to examine different sources and shoot fact from fiction or fact from false. I don't see that not ending up in the hands of someone who wants to control that and use it for their own nefarious gain, whether it's government or not. So, like what I say is when you consider something fact, if you base it on reasonable sources, there's a lot of things on the internet that are official narratives, I guess. Even Chat GBT will look up the first top results on certain things and give you a response to that. I just don't think that's a smart way to be basing a lot of citizen science stuff. I think the reason why we call it citizen science is because there's people that are investigating on their own and digging through documents and researching on their own. Some of the people I respect the most that do that type of stuff, because some people spend 30, 40 years doing it.
mm, but still, the Hugging Face,
Oh God.
this open
I'll just
source
edit out the
website.
minute I just ranted.
No. It's I agree with it. It's but what I like me the thing I like to do is to look at what people do with technology, the usage they have with technology. And in 2005, there were the Web 2. It wasn't a technological change into the web. The Web 2 was the usage change into the web. Suddenly, people had the ability to have their own blogs, their own journal, their own radio with podcasting, 204, their own TV with YouTube, 205, their own social networks, so communication agency. And we saw what the rise of amateurs and what they've been able to do. I mean, you are a children of Web 2 because, I mean, you can do a podcast without being a broadcaster, without having a huge resource and acknowledgement of your right to actually interview people from the other side of the earth and so
Felt like that was
on.
an insult, but whatever.
Yeah. But
I'm trying my
the
best, man. Damn, I haven't talked about the science subject in a while.
but the open source is it's really powerful. In 205, I don't know if you remember, the Microsoft said that Linux is a cancer. Don't you remember that? No, you're not into computing. Steve Ballmer
Do
claimed
I
that
look like
Linux.
I'm into computing? Do I? Do I?
Yeah,
Do I
you're
strike that
nerd.
vibe?
You're
Oh yeah.
geek. You're
Let me
nerd.
get my
Uh,
black rim glasses
uh,
out.
embrace the geek culture and the nerd culture. And in 205, it wasn't. We didn't know if tech tools that were going to be closed source or it would be open source and free as a free software source. And nowadays, mainly all tools are open source. Microsoft Visual Studio Code is open source. Linux is,
Yeah, but I don't think they predicted it would get that big, though. If people would have known the internet would have gotten this big, they would have definitely charged people to get on the internet.
but I couldn't because it was a citizen science project. Linus Torvald
Yeah.
just made that in his basement.
Yes, and he wanted it to be free, but I'm saying if they would have known the capacity the internet would have came into every single person's life, they definitely would have put a thing on that.
Yeah, but they couldn't.
It's the same thing with they couldn't because yeah, I understand his thing, but I'm saying is now there's that different train of thinking now there. Any app that comes out now, I mean, I think Elon Musk is the only person that makes his stuff open source patents on a lot of his devices. Good guy, makes a lot of money, does a lot of good things, gets a lot of crap unnecessarily, which I don't agree with on but there's a lot of things now. Nobody's doing it open source a whole lot of ways. It always comes into a business sees it or buys it up or
No,
something of
but
that sort. It's capitalism.
you can do business with open source, not a problem. What you're going to sell is services, and you're on the way on the fact that you know very well this technology. So, who I'm going to ask for advice or some specific development which are specific to my space rocket or whatever, I will go to the one which know very well this technology. So you can sell, you can make big bucks with open source and free software. That's what some companies are. Many companies are doing it. It's not. It's not a problem, but also it means that any little actors, any little citizen can also use very powerful tools. And if I go back to the Hugging Face, what I find really surprising this year is that for the first time, Hugging Face, if I want to summarize what it is a kind of a library of pre-trained brains. Do you remember the movie called Frankenstein Jr. from what was his name again? Frankenstein Jr. from and Dr. Frankenstein wants to make a creature, a monster, and he sends his apprentice into finding a brain, but it wasn't really bright, his colleague, and he did come back with the abnormal brain. So that's why the Frankenstein creature did turn badly. But Hugging Face, which is actually made by French people, three French people, but with American money, because they went to the States to do that. You've got on this website 360,000 pre-trained brains, open source with the dataset. Those brains, they are specialized into different subjects, like natural language processing, like text to audio, text to picture, text to video, speech to text, and so on and so on and so on. And you can use them like they are, pre-trained, or if you think that some of them have some bias, well, you just look at the data set because the data set are published. The research paper are published too on the website. And you look at the data set and you just remove the parts you think are data with bias section in it. And
I like that.
you retrain.
I
You
like that.
retrain your brain, which correspond to your values. And then because it's open source, you don't need to use a server which is in the United States because you don't trust the government and so on. You keep it in-house in your institution or even at home. And that's the beauty of open source. And we have all these super powerful tools now, which are available, and which, by the way, will probably a part of the solution to UAP in order to feed those systems into automatic recognition of shapes into what happens on cameras and so on, and to propose to human aware people some potentially interesting case to investigate further. And the beauty of computing is that it's very patient. So it can work forever until it catches something which is potentially interesting and that we can continue to investigate. So the rise of AI, and especially open source AI, the rise of Aussian culture of investigation, the rise of citizen science, I think it's a pretty good combination which could bring a potentially interesting result in the future.
You said could, which gives me hope that you understand where my pessimism comes in about people doing the things to better society instead of
Well,
profit.
for me, the technology and the science, especially the technology, is just a tool. It's never good. It's never bad. With a knife, I can kill someone, but I can also better eat, have a better food in my system to be more healthy. What is the problem is the education we have into using those tools,
Yeah.
and uh, and that is I think the most difficult and the most.
Again, my points here in this conversation, we're not dismissing the technology, they're just dismissing the application of these technologies. I just don't ever see it being put in the right hands of people. I'm sure there's good
but
people out there
but
that are
we
doing great
but
research.
we all have a voice. We all can contribute to any
Look,
project.
my voice compared to Bill Gates ain't shit. I'll just let you know that right now, man.
Yeah, but there's a researcher called Clay Shorkey, and he wrote a book in 2005 called "Here Comes Everybody," and explained that in the history of mankind, there's three phases in terms of communication. Because we are social animals, we communicate, right? For example, if I speak to you, I speak one to one, or maybe there's few people around. So it's one to one communication, it's real time, and you're not going to influence a lot of people, just one or maybe people around you. Then came technology, like the press, like TV, like radio, called broadcasting. It's one to many. So one actor, one institution could influence a lot of other people through the power of broadcasting. It's one to many. And we didn't have that because you had to be rich to have it. And you have to be influential and powerful if you wanted to have your voice available to other many people. But what happened with technology, especially around 2005, and also through the free software and open source culture, which managed to took over the closed source technology, is many to many tools. You, you today through social media and social network, it's many to many. Anyone can talk to many people, and any of this many people can talk to many people. So the framework to gather information, to share information, to influence other people is different, and for the worst and for the better.
Yeah.
But that's a problem of culture. But we can't say that we we don't have any say into how things are going to shape, because through the many to many topology, if you want, it's the first time that we actually have an influence.
What would you say would be a subject that has had the people's voice actually change anything about it?
A subject where the people voice
Yeah,
is changing.
if you're saying what I would agree with, which is the people have a voice and people can voice and be able to make sure that these things go on the correct paths, what would you say is subject in any history that has gone the way that the people had a voice to be able to speak about that wasn't influenced in some sense?
I mean, we are all influenced by media, but also by people. We are
True,
very influenceable.
but
But what I can say is, for example, if I look at the Ukrainian conflict, um, I've looked at into the what the media in France is saying about the conflict, And what they're saying into the media is very clear. It's Russia is 100% wrong, and the Occident and the OTAN is 100% right, and we didn't make any mistakes, and the Russian made all the mistakes. If But because I've got technology, I've got social media, I can go on YouTube. And one of the first interesting YouTube I found was from an academics of a geopolitician, and he gave some very clear explanation in 2015 about the situation that I would never have known through the traditional media, and which completely rebalanced my understanding of the conflict. So for me, we made some mistakes, and they made some mistakes. It's very gray, but it's not a black and white situation. Uh,
You know
uh,
on YouTube that they limit the conversations you can have on Russia and Ukraine?
yeah,
Do you know that curbs intelligence when you start having people censor themselves or not be able to limit maybe the full conversation about the discussion of the subject matter?
the fact that things disappears.
No, well, things can disappear, but like there's certain things you can't mention in a video and they will take down your whole video, even if it's a small little 1 minute thing and not tell you what you did wrong.
Yeah, that's a problem because YouTube is too big. I mean, there's no alternative. So it has a power, and also that's a bad view also of AI because
Algorithm
the
sucks.
algorithm, yeah, a lot of things are because they're very conservative, they don't want to have problems, so they don't really care about the exceptions to the intellectual property or whatever. So you've got a right to satire on other or citation of something and so on, but they're way too strong into the way they how do you say that the filters are way too high. But the beauty of open source is that you can still have other websites. So, for example, there's a website called there's a software called PeerTube. PeerTube. It's a place where you can take your own server and put your videos on it. And obviously, it's not going to be as influential as YouTube because not everybody's going to know each other, right? But through what we call the syndication. No, how do you say that in English? It's like Mastodon. Mastodon. It's you can connect all the server together, kind of syndication, and so it appear as a single entity, even if it's multiple servers. Um, if we didn't have that, you would disappear completely. I mean, if Google decide to ban you, it's over. But you still can survive a little bit. Uh, yeah, the power of the big corporation obviously is a problem. I mean, I really feel that we are at a time where uh, a lot of countries want to take back the control of information, and it's going to be difficult.
I just don't think you can pick and choose what's right and wrong. I don't think there's I think a lot of people have their own base intelligence, obviously, and they're gonna have their own
Yeah.
biases and things that they choose. And I think
But you can inquiry. You can do you can do the Sherlock Holmes stuff, and you can also decide. In my case, there's a many subject where I don't know what is wrong and what is right, and this is this culture we need to develop,
I agree.
and to get out also of of the AI algorithm, which puts you into a bubble. For example, the
It's gonna, man, it always leads back to, and it's a tough word to try and lump into this, but it's always leads back to eugenics. I hate to say that, and you're going to be like, what? Eugenics? What are you talking about? People want people to think like them. They want people that there's a lot of people. Let's look at social media as a best example. How many people are stuck in their own little groups and don't ever branch out of their own little groups? Everyone that thinks exactly like them. That's exactly what big tech does. That's exactly what everything does now. All political stuff that gets involved. They just want people that think like them. Everyone needs to think this way on the internet. Everyone needs to think this way on the internet. I've spoken to many academics and they've used that example, eugenics. And I say, well, that's a little bit drastic, right? And they're like, no, they just want people to agree with this. And if you don't agree, eventually it'll get to a point where you're just off the internet. They're not going to let you allow on there. You can make multiple accounts. I've seen that with friends' shows that get taken down, all for talking about things like Atlantis. What? Just because someone wants to have a hypothesis on the existence, younger dryas impact hypothesis, how the that's another one that gets lumped in the conspiracy realm. I was like, how are you going to know if you don't have the conversation and don't let people sort out the information for themselves? But that's just how the cultures work. It's the main thing is the issue. I guess maybe my issue isn't so much government, it's more on the fact that it's culture. And culture is influenced by so many factors. And some of those factors are now politics. It's why the climate topic is one of the most heated debates and it gets lumped into the political realm. There's just things now that become taboo and controversial that shouldn't be controversial because of the fact that politics, all these things that should not be influenced, are now being influenced into these subjects. And if you talk about big tech corporations, YouTube, any of these things, they're owned and they have a political bias. A lot of them do. And I think even if you watch the Zuckerberg interview with Joe Rogan, he even talked about the Hunter Biden laptop thing that happened in Delaware, the state beside me. I could tell you it was 100% real, but it was a conspiracy for 6 months because if you agreed with that, you were a Trumper or you were a MAGA person when the laptop did exist. And Zuckerberg even said it. He said, FBI came to me, told me to make sure that link was not sendable. And he told him everything that the FBI told him to do, saying it was Russian propaganda, is what he called it. And he said that on air. I mean, I like I said, I don't trust anything. When you look at sources of information, you can read it and you're only if you agree with it, you consider it fact. And that's for a lot of people. A device being able to decipher from various different sources, still though, what's the top thing it's probably going to go to first? YouTube. I mean, if it finds it there on YouTube, is it going to go do any more digging to verify its claim or be like, I got you your claim? It would be the same thing if I searched up coffee on the internet, coffee health effects, gives me a list of bad side effects. Okay, I can show you, don't drink coffee. Then I get what? I look up coffee positive benefits, and then I get a whole list of positive benefits. So it's like, well, there's negative and positives, right? Oh, no. Well, you're only going to have two people fighting over the argument of coffee's only good for you or coffee's only bad for you. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think you bring up really, really good points about a lot of stuff. I'm pretty sure I agree with everything you said. It's just I'm more concerned about where it leads to, where this beneficial technology goes into, and I don't see any avenue that I would believe maybe a citizen would be able to do it, but I just don't see them not being manipulated in a sense. I hate to say it like that, but capitalism is real. If they try and start their own business and try and get an app out there, they can get bought out. They can get crushed because the thing's already monopolized as it is. And they could be influenced by a certain thing. A lot of people sell their companies and sell their startups. So for me, I don't know. I'm more concerned about, I just don't think the climate is, there's not a chance to be an entrepreneur. There's not a chance to release or try and want to do good or even have a conversation. Everything has to be sides. And I don't like that. But
Yeah,
what
but
do you
one way, and I agree fully with you, but one way we can do is try to beat the algorithm. And
beat it
what the beat it?
with a stick? I'm
No,
kidding. I'm kidding.
because the goal is the goal of the algorithm of the AI is to put yourself into your initial profile, what you are interested in. And what I did since now a few years is I force myself to follow people I don't like, I really dislike.
Damn, is that why you're following me?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. You've got it. Yeah, you see,
damn.
that's investigation I was talking
I'm
about.
learning.
So the thing is, it has a very strange effect to do that because first you are very angry because obviously they're going to say things which are completely stupid, but from time to time they provide information that you wouldn't have seen in the other side of the argument or to the other people you follow, and information which are actually extremely useful. And to me, anyway. And by doing this, the algorithm, the AI, don't know in which category to put you. And therefore, it provides you with a more balanced view of the different views of the world. And that should be taught in schools, right, into how we use social media. Social media and social network it's very extremely young. We don't have the maturity to use it actually, and but we can still influence the way they work to actually have a better view of the world. And even company like TikTok, they were the first to actually put in their profile a button to reset your profile, to tell AI, forget about me, forget about everything I've seen before, and relearn about my profile. So I'm not kept into my initial interest when I first interacted with the social media. And maybe we will see also some regulation in the future, because as a democracy, we can also learn from the bad things which happen with the technology and try to influence them into something which is better for us. And one way to influence them would be, well, impose a reset button on those social media, on social network, where when we can by law ask the AI to forget about our initial profile. And maybe we can impose to have 20% of information of content which is not corresponding to our beliefs and so on, to expose us again to something which is not what we believe. But all this is so new. I mean, the fact that we could really very precisely select the information we are feed on is new, because before, in the 80s, I grew in the 80s, and everybody was watching the three TV channels, and everybody's got more or less the same narratives. And after, you could decide to read different books than other people, but we had at least a common ground of information, a minimal common ground of information in order to exchange. This kind of disappeared with the social media network. But as a democracy, we can still look at what seems to be bad and decide how we can correct it, or try something else.
I'm with you. Probably a little bit less optimistic, but I get you. I mean, I think you bring up really, really good points. I feel like Neil deGrasse Tyson's guest. You've insulted me so much today. Um, no,
No, no, you're
I
very
think.
respectful. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a is nearly a bullier. I mean, toward
I
the
meant you
right
were
to study.
You were Neil deGrasse Tyson to me. Good God, you called me stupid, and you only follow me because
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
entertaining.
I'm proud of
Okay.
it.
No, I do appreciate that we have almost been talking 2 hours. I do appreciate the time you gave me to talk about some of these subjects. I'll have to have you back once I don't know, my ego heals. Not just kidding.
Yeah, when we found the UAP and the NHI, the non-human intelligence,
No, I think you
we
bring up some really, really good points on some things. I'm a little bit more pessimistic, obviously, because I've just explored a lot of areas where it's always gone kind of bad. And I think that's just because I don't know. I think we live in the illusion of democracy. I know it seems like it, but there's a lot of things that obviously haven't that should have been changed, and real active change should have been participated in, but it never fully occurred because of the fact that we do get distracted. I mean, time is attention spans, everything that gets flooded to you on the internet is ridiculous. The amount of information that's flooded to you, where people can't focus on one thing for so long, they move on to the next thing. I mean, Russia and Ukraine was such a big issue, and now it's Israel and Palestine. There's always something that's right in front of our face, and it comes this whole concern, and then it goes out the door. Next thing you know, we don't talk about it anymore. And even though it was just less than a month ago or 2 months ago, it was all over the place. You couldn't take a step without seeing it. So, I mean, I'm hoping that a lot of people are doing the new method of things, which is backing away from the technology a little bit and kind of trying to sort out information, single process things, take days off, because think that helps our train of thinking. Um, but I don't know. Social media is addicting as hell. I love being on
it
it.
is
I had
be,
to cut
be,
it off.
be, because we are social animals. So we need we seek for those connections, but we need to understand what is called social psychology. No, it's what is called behaviorism. I mean, the way we are socially influenced, and that's something we should learn in schools. So we would know about how brands sell their products and so on. And I don't know if I told you last time about a neuroscientist researcher who made a TED video, and he explained that they took in the lab three people and they tell them to play with balls. So they just took a ball and threw into each. They played together.
Is that the
Throw the
gorilla that's
ball.
walking?
No, not this
Oh,
one.
damn.
Not this one. And before the experiment happened, they took two of them and say, "Hey, you're going to play together, but after a while, you don't send the ball to the third guy. Okay, you just play together. Okay." So okay, we paid for that. We're going to do what you want. And during the experiments, they had some EEG headset to see the electric activity of the brain. And what they've seen is that the electric signature of the brain, when the third guy is not included into the play anymore, is exactly the same as a physical pain. And they treated the guy exactly the same as the physical pain by giving the medics the pills that we use for physical pain. It means that the fact to be rejected by a group in which you weren't interacting in is as painful or is seen as violent as a physical injury for a human. And that we come back again to the why more researchers are not studying the subject, because they play in a group which are academics, and if it could mean that they are rejected by the group in which the future is, obviously it's a real pain. And that's why true innovation is difficult really to happen in small groups where people have a lot to lose. And that's why I come back again to the citizen science and the Asian culture, because it's just a hobby. If they fail and if it doesn't work, it won't be as painful, because as a hobby you don't really care what other people really think. But it's this idea that we know actually very little, or actually I did know very little about the psychological mechanism and the way we are socially programmed, which explain our behaviors. And I find it crazy that we don't study that in schools. I mean, that's what we need to know in school, is the way we are influenced, the way we limit ourselves also. This is not studied, but it should be.
Francois, I appreciate the time you gave me to talk on my show. Is there a place where people can find your links?
Yeah, on X,
Twitter.
which is
Twitter.
Twitter. Yeah, Twitter, you prefer Twitter. Yeah, X is so weird. I mean, you have the impression you're going to have a strange content into this platform, but it's it's arrobas F Schnell, FCHFCHNELL. That's where I share many links about science. I'm interested into kind of disruptive or innovative science, and also about the UAP investigation, also about AI. But I think all this could be linked together. We'll see in a few years what
We
will
will be
happen.
doing a part two at some point.
Yes, I
Um,
hope. I
yes,
continue to
yes.
find those interesting events
As long as
as
you
a
keep
citizen
following
science.
me. No, I appreciate the time, and thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for next